Growing up, we are taught who to be, what to like, and how to show up in the world. And as we evolve and grow up, we begin to realize that some of the things that we have been taught are not right or no longer aligned with the person that we are becoming. And in the process of evolving, we realize how many traumas we face and how many challenges have came up from those traumas. As we transition into adulthood and a more evolved version of ourselves, we face many milestones and many barriers in the process of becoming the most authentic version of ourselves. And one of the biggest barriers to that is the old knowledge and substitute for the new one. For me, when I started becoming an adult and transitioning, it felt so weird to unlearn those things that I've always been taught. When we have parental figures or guidances in our lives, we feel like whatever it is that they're saying has to be right because we have no other opinion or no other view in life, and we're new to life. And so we hold everything that they say with much grace and with much comfort, not knowing that some of those things aren't right and that they're only doing what they've been taught to do. And that's when we enter the process of learning to unlearn and then relearning. Relearning what is right for us, relearning the path that we've been set to take, relearning how to show up as the fullest version of ourselves. But as you know, growth is not a linear path. And when we're growing, we're not just moving forward, but we're also learning to shed certain parts of ourselves, to grieve things that we thought once were, and to now begin to create a new truth for ourselves. Here are 3 truths to unlearning. The first is we need to unlearn wanting validation. When we aren't brought up with self-esteem, when we are taught that other things outside of us make us worthy, and when we begin to develop inherent shame in our childhood, when we grow up, we seek validation from anything and everything because we were never taught to validate ourselves. And when you seek validation from everything outside of you, you need that yes in order to give yourself a yes. And that becomes very problematic when we want to evolve, when we want to grow, and when we want to try new things. Not everybody is going to align with our thoughts, our beliefs, our values for what we have for ourselves, and not everybody is going to agree with the path that we are taking. But if we rely on that external yes in order to give ourselves the yes and the go-ahead to start that new life and to start that new journey, we're always going to be held behind waiting for somebody to validate us. This personally is the hardest truth for me to face because my whole life was built off of my parental validation. If my parents didn't validate me, I felt like something was wrong with myself. If my parents didn't validate me, I felt like inherently I was doing something wrong and it had to be right. And growing up with that mindset, I could never trust myself. And when I did make a decision, I ended up self-sabotaging, thinking that my views for myself and my thoughts for my life had to be wrong or had to be flawed because other people did not agree with them. For me, I found the best way to unlearn needing validation is to validate yourself and ask yourself questions before you go asking anybody else. Should I do this? Is the question you should ask yourself. You shouldn't ask somebody else, should I do this? And you have to take those risks. One of the hardest risks for me to take was to start posting. I grew up hating being seen, hating being perceived. I always avoided a camera. And then I was called to start creating content to uplift people through art and through therapy. And I had no clue how to show up. But when I posted that first post, there were tools in place to help me not seek that validation. And one of the tools that I personally loved was hide, like, and share count. And when I clicked yes to hiding, like, and share count, it made me a lot more comfortable with posting things because the first thing I wasn't checking was how many people liked it because I couldn't see. And that made me feel more comfortable in myself and in the practice that I had been called to do. The moment you stop seeking validation from other people, you'll realize that validation has always been within you. Unlearn being a perfectionist and always needing things to be perfect. Along with always seeking validation from outside sources, as we grow up, we begin to want to do things perfectly. If I wasn't doing things perfectly to what my parents wanted, I wasn't doing things right and there was something wrong with me. And that was the inherent core sentence that was developed within me. And so everything that I had to do had to be perfect. Every hobby I learned, I had to be great at it right away. I was not given room to fail. And perfection is one of the biggest hindrances to your journey. Perfection will have you waiting for the perfect time. Perfection Perfection will have you waiting for the perfect moment. And later down along the lines in life, you will realize that there will never be a perfect time and there will never be a perfect moment. And I know we hear that all the time, but the truth is the clock is still ticking. People are still growing. You're still getting older and older. And things will not change until you let them change. And you can't keep waiting for the perfect moment because there will always be an excuse to replace that why. The truth is, the most perfect way that you can show up is accepting your flaws and accepting your missteps. There's never been a moment in time where anybody has ever done anything perfect except for Jesus. And we all know that none of us are exactly like him. We're human, we are flawed, and we are fickle, and we're going to make mistakes. But at the end of the day, those mistakes do not define us. At the end of the day, we can stutter, we can make hiccups, but the final product of what we produce in the midst of all those missteps, in the midst of all that imperfection, is what really counts. And it is rewarding to know that you weren't perfect, you made mistakes, you weren't fully healed, but you still went after it and embarked on that journey of unlearning these things that have been hindering you all your life. And when you begin to unravel the ropes of perfectionism, you realize that nothing is perfect, and that's what makes the world perfect, is that all of us are imperfect and we're flawed, but we all seem to be able to unite and work together. Perfectionism is a myth, and perfectionism is not real. It is not real. The moment you let go of perfectionism, you will bump into so many suddenlies in your life that you have never experienced before, and you'll realize that that is one of the main things that's been holding you back. Lastly, we have to unlearn our resistance to change. Change can be so scary, especially because we have no clue what lies ahead of us. But what's so beautiful about change is that you don't have to stay where you once were. And I realized later on down the line that being stagnant is way worse than changing. Waking up to the same boring, mundane life is way worse than changing. The best example that I can give of that is this video right here. While recording this audio, I've stuttered a bunch of times. I've missaid my words, but it's the change that I'm making that counts. If you go down my channel, all I've posted is art and talks, and that's what I started off with. But there was something in me that wanted to do more, that wanted to create more, that wanted to show up in a different way. But it was so scary. I had all the tools right there, right in front of me. I had the camera, I had the money, I had everything that I needed to pursue this new form of myself, but I had no clue how to do it. But that only started when I made up in my mind that changing will not be scarier than staying stagnant. I can continue to make the same old, boring, mundane videos and lose my passion for what I love to do, or I can step out on faith and decide to pursue a different way of expression. What's scary about change? It might be harder to edit this video. What's scary about change? This might be a complete flop. But what's amazing about change is that you tried. And the minute that your mind and that your body sees that you're trying new things and that you're able to execute new things, even if they fail, even if things don't go according to plan, now you know down in your mind, deep down in your mind, that you can do hard things, that you can do new things. Even if they fail, even if they don't succeed the first time, you've proven to yourself that you're worthy of change and that you're able to change. The more that you stay in a life that isn't aligned for you, the more that you don't step out on faith, you give the power to those traumas. You give the power to fear. You give the power to anxiety. You give the power to doubt. But when you step out on faith and trust God's plan for your life, you reclaim your power. And slowly that shame turns into worth. And slowly that doubt turns into faith. And slowly that anxiety turns into power. So if you needed a reminder to step out on faith today, if you needed a reminder that things need to change, you have to remember that you need to unlearn in order to relearn.